For 7 weeks, this orange cat was left alone in an empty apartment. No food, no water, nobody coming back. 3 foster volunteers saw his photo and said no. The shelter had 22 days left before they ran out of options. Everyone called him too angry, too damaged, too far gone. But one woman sat down on the floor of a spare bedroom and simply refused to leave. Her name was Kate. His name was Chester. And what happened next changed both of them forever. Everyone at the Riverside Animal Shelter agreed. This cat was not going to make it easy for anyone. They said those golden eyes had been through too much, that the scowl was permanent, that some animals come into rescue already finished with the idea of people. They were completely wrong. The call came on a Monday morning. A property manager in the Millbrook district had filed a report after entering a vacated unit on the 3rd floor. The previous tenant had been served an eviction notice 7 weeks earlier and cleared out overnight, leaving behind a rust-colored cat with a face like a disappointed accountant and absolutely zero interest in being helped. No food left, no water, just Chester, and a level of personal offense that filled the entire room. When Kate first saw the intake photo, she understood exactly why 3 other foster volunteers had already passed. This wasn't a scared cat. This was a cat who had looked at the circumstances, conducted a thorough internal review, and arrived at a firm conclusion. Humans were, on balance, not worth the effort. Those amber eyes weren't uncertain. They were decided, like he had already written the final report and submitted it somewhere. His coat was a deep, unwashed orange, the color of old autumn leaves, and his face held an expression so permanently unimpressed that the shelter staff had started referring to him simply as the one who looks like he wants to speak with a manager. Someone had named him Chester on the intake form. No explanation given. It fit him like a tailored coat. The shelter coordinator called Kate on a Tuesday afternoon. He's been isolated for 22 days. He's gone for 2 handlers. We've tried everything we have, and honestly, we're not sure what comes next. Can you take him for 2 weeks? Just so we know we didn't give up before we gave him every possible chance. Kate had fostered 14 cats in the past 4 years, out of a small 2-bedroom apartment on the west side of town. Feral rescues, medically fragile kittens, one extremely opinionated Siamese who had dismantled my bookshelf in protest of something she never fully identified, but she had never had a cat look at her the way Chester did when she transferred his carrier into the backseat of her car. It wasn't aggression, it was something quieter and somehow harder to sit with. Mild, total, deeply considered disappointment. The first 5 days were a standoff conducted entirely on Chester's terms. He claimed the guest room, positioning himself on the windowsill with the settled authority of someone who had always lived there and considered Kate's presence the novelty. Every visit, food, water, a clean tray, was met with the same slow, deliberate tracking of those golden eyes. Ears neutral, expression unchanged, the faint suggestion that she was interrupting something. He never hissed. That would almost have been a relief. Instead, he simply watched, evaluated, and returned his gaze to the window with the calm finality of a judge who had heard enough testimony. Kate didn't push, didn't reach toward him, didn't fill the silence with reassurances she wasn't sure she could back up. She sat on the floor with her back against the bed frame and talked about her commute, about the coffee shop on Delaney Street that kept getting her order wrong, about nothing that mattered at all. I'm not asking you for anything right now. I'm just going to keep showing up. You can do whatever you want with that. Chester regarded her for a long moment, then redirected his attention to a pigeon on the fire escape outside, clearly finding it more professionally relevant. But he stayed on the windowsill, and the windowsill was in the same room as Kate. That was something. On the 7th day, Kate was sitting on the floor scrolling through her phone when she heard it. One soft step, then another. Chester had come down from the windowsill. He wasn't approaching, he was standing near the closet door, about 10 feet away, watching from a new position. His expression remained one of comprehensive dissatisfaction with the general state of things, but he was closer than he had ever voluntarily been. Kate didn't look up directly. "Making your rounds, Chester?" His scowl deepened, if anything, but he took 4 more slow steps forward, stopped, held his position with the energy of someone who needed it understood that this was entirely his idea and carried no implications whatsoever. They stayed like that for 26 minutes. Chester maintained his expression of principled disappointment. Kate finished reading an article about container gardening. It was improbably one of the quieter evenings she'd had in a long time. "I see you're still here, but haven't subscribed yet. That genuinely bothers me a little. Hit subscribe, you'll want to know how this turns out." By the middle of the 3rd week, Chester had settled into a pattern. Each evening, once Kate was on the couch with her book, he would make his way out from wherever he'd been and take up a position on the opposite end, not close enough to contact, close enough to monitor. His face never softened. That magnificent, grumpy dignity remained fully intact, but the active suspicion in his eyes had quieted into something that looked, if you knew what you were looking for, a little like presence, a little like company. He had also, somewhere in that 3rd week, developed opinions about Kate's schedule. If she stayed up past 11, Chester would appear in the doorway of the bedroom and simply stare at her from the hall, not meowing, not making any sound at all, just standing there in the dark with that expression of profound managerial disappointment until she put down whatever she was doing and went to bed. The first time it happened, Kate laughed out loud. The second time, she actually listened. By the 4th time, she had simply accepted that Chester had appointed himself the keeper of a reasonable bedtime, and that this was now part of the arrangement. Music. He also, without announcement, began following her from room to room, not closely, never closely, always at a distance of approximately 8 feet, as though maintaining the gap were a matter of professional principle. Kate would move to the kitchen, Chester would appear in the kitchen doorway. She'd move to the bathroom, Chester would position himself outside the door with the focused attention of a security consultant assessing a potential liability. He never asked to be let in, he simply needed to know where she was, at all times, for reasons he declined to explain. It was, Kate realized one afternoon while Chester monitored her from the hallway as she made a cup of tea, the most consistently she had been looked after in years. The evening that shifted everything arrived on a Thursday. Kate had received news that morning that sat with her all day, the kind that makes everything else feel slightly out of focus. She came home, set her keys on the kitchen counter at the Millbrook apartment, and simply sat on the couch without turning on any lights. Just quiet, just still. The cushion dipped beside her. Chester had crossed the full length of the couch. He was right there, wearing his permanent expression of cosmic grievance, looking thoroughly unimpressed with the emotional atmosphere. And then, with the slow gravity of a decision that had been carefully weighed and reluctantly reached, he stepped forward, circled once, and lowered himself directly on Kate's lap. He didn't make it soft. He simply arrived, like a warm, opinionated 10-pound fact that had decided this was now its location. His face didn't change. He still looked dissatisfied with everything in general, but he started purring, a low, steady, entirely serious purr that Kate felt in her sternum. Some stories deserve to be shared. This is one of them. She didn't move for a long time, just sat in the dark apartment on the west side of town with a rust-colored cat on her lap, and something that had been wound tight all day slowly came loose. The shelter coordinator called the next morning about a long-term placement at a cat sanctuary outside the city. Kate looked at Chester, who had positioned himself on the kitchen windowsill and was issuing a silent, sustained judgment toward the building across the alley. "About that placement," Kate said, "I don't think it's going to be necessary." 4 months later, Kate's apartment has been thoroughly reorganized according to Chester's preferences. He sleeps on her pillow, not adjacent to it, on it, his round, rust-colored, permanently skeptical face approximately 3 inches from hers every morning. He occupies her laptop during work calls, presenting his expression of considered disapproval directly to her colleagues on screen. He has relocated exactly 19 objects from their original positions, apparently as ongoing commentary. He has claimed every warm surface in the apartment and assessed each one with the same unhurried authority. People ask Kate whether Chester ever looks happy, whether that expression ever changes, whether there's ever any sign that he's not perpetually filing a grievance against the universe. She scratches behind his right ear, the specific spot he will, after due consideration, permit. And she doesn't really answer, just smiles. Because here is what Kate knows now that she didn't know 7 weeks into fostering a rust-colored cat who'd been written off by 4 volunteers and left alone in a vacated apartment in the Millbrook district. The angriest animals are almost never angry. They are careful, and when a careful animal finally, quietly, on its own schedule, decides that you are someone worth being near, that is not a small thing. That is everything. Chester didn't need Kate to fix him. He needed her to sit on the floor of the guest room night after night and simply not leave. Would you have stayed?